Hi. Oh, we get to sit. That feels so much better. Okay, we're gonna zip on through the intros. We are missing a panelist, but that's okay, because now we have the John and John show. This is John Mann from Artefact, and this is John Kestner from Supermechanical. And we're gonna start this off, because we've been talking about design this whole time, with a little bit different. We're gonna expand the definitions a little bit, because what is both smart and what are we talking about when we're talking about the kitchen? Because I think we have kind of this narrow idea here. So I can't call you John. We'll go
Just
with
address it and we'll figure that out.
All right, fight it out. Go.
This is working. Okay. So we committed the cardinal sin, and we actually discussed a little bit beforehand as we were hearing all these great talks. But the one thing we wanted to do is take a moment and step back and say, well, what are we talking about when we say smart? And I think for a lot, people consider it if it's a connected device, if it interacts with my phone or has a display. And really, it's not about remote controlling the devices that we have or that we're going to put in, but it's actually the smart is those moments where we can get out of the interaction, where the devices might do something on our behalf without having to manually do this, where it understands intent. I think that's one of the definitions of smart. So that opportunity, if you think about Nest, I don't have to pull out my phone. I just, when I'm cold, I turn it up. When it's warm, I turn it down. And when I leave the house, it turns off. And so that's intelligence, and it's doing things, understanding that intent. And once you create that foundation, then you have an opportunity for other devices to play along. And that's where you start to get smart.
How about this one? Okay. Yeah. I think one of the important things to do is just define what you mean by smart when you say it. We use it as a shortcut for a lot of things, but it means something different to all of us. Same thing with Internet of Things, that kind of thing. And I think to some degree that just holds back our common understanding, because we all have this idea of this perfect experience that it's going to be, and it's not the same. Like right now, I think smart just tends to be a short word for it has a radio in it, it talks to an app, and in my opinion, that's kind of the opposite of smart. That's adding complexity and, kind of like we were talking about, you really should be starting with what is the one thing it could do better for you, that it can, smart would be like, oh, it just took care of a thing that you didn't even think about, not just adding more features to market, I guess.
All right, so with this, and we've talked about this, we've heard this throughout the day, because we've heard, like, you should start, if I were starting, actually we talked about this on the phone call, so I've got a lot of things in my head, but if you're designing a device for the kitchen today, would you start with something that is kind of a feature device, like you guys have a connected thermometer, or would you start with like an all-in system, so the Innit guys just were like, we will cook everything, it will be smart, you can make a whole roast chicken and it sounds amazing, but it also is like, well, how's that gonna work again, what? So how do you think is kind of the more practical way of going about doing this, from both the design and hardware and even just getting users to buy into it?
Right, I mean, that is the huge challenge, and I mean, obviously we have an opinion. We make connected thermometers, so we do believe that one approach is to simply enhance existing tools that people like and use, and try to stay out of the way and just do that job better for you, and adding technology where it makes sense. But the panel with recipe apps and driving it through content is also going to be an awesome way to start it. It's a big space, and there's a lot of different ways that people cook and people do kitchen stuff, so there isn't one answer.
Yeah, I think the kitchen means a multitude of things to people, because it's about understanding what motivates them, and everyone in that kitchen has different motivations. It may be about nutrition, and I want to eat healthier, and in that case, it's going to start with the recipes and being able to get to finding those healthy recipes. I think the Yumly guy said it very well. I mean, we sort of have this paradox of choice, Right now, there's so many options. It's not just I have 2 cookbooks on my shelf. I have the entire internet at my disposal. So how do I find something? I mean, think about how hard it is to figure out what you want to watch on Netflix tonight because there's so many options. And so Smart is helping to narrow down those choices if it's about nutrition. It could be about simplifying this complex task of cooking 3 different meals for the members of the family because no one wants to eat the same thing. And so those motivations are going to be what sells the Smart Kitchen, and that's going to be a different motivation for every family, for every household, for every individual. And so we have to understand that first.
John, swap out your mic, maybe.
I did.
We're juggling. All right. So it's really understanding the different motivations and needs of your audience and really curating not just the technology solution to that audience, but how you market it and how you introduce the value back to the consumer. Because no one really cares about the tech for tech. We may, right? We're on the coasts, we're in Silicon Valley, we're here in Seattle, you're back in New York. But we're not the mass market, and so we have to understand how to communicate the value of the Smart Kitchen. Part of that's probably by not calling it the Smart Kitchen and calling it actually what the value proposition is and leading with that first and foremost. It could be making great salmon or not murdering the chicken. It could just be eating much more healthily and having that happen much quicker.
Well, do you want to?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say, you were speaking about how do you get people to wrap their heads around it. And that's why I think it's kind of interesting to start with these single-purpose tools that people already know how to use and just doing it a little better and not maybe over-branding it as smart and it's going to solve all your problems, but just it does the existing thing you want to do.
Well, let's kind of break up this kind of monolithic kitchen and food prep and food into some categories. So I think of it as like you've got planning, like meal planning, you've got food prep, you've got food consumption. Do we want to add some other things to that? And we can talk about like how we can make those intelligent, or does that seem like a reasonable kind of framework to talk about this in? And I'm going to get you guys involved, so start thinking. Mental inventory. Do we want to add stuff? I feel like Michael Wolff has something to add to this if he's wandering around. He's not. Okay.
Did we talk about cleanup? Was that in that list?
Oh, cleanup.
Right?
Well, I'm never in charge of cleanup. All right. So when we talk about food prep, meal planning, I'm thinking about the recipe guys, right? So how many of you guys use technology in your meal planning or even do meal planning? Anyone? Show of hands? Woo woo. All right. How many of you guys would like to, but you find everything daunting? You're like, Okay, so nailed it on the food prep and tech, right? Food planning, these P's. Food prep, things like drop, or there's like the countertop and things like that. How many of you guys use smart things for food prep? That would be like your thermometer. Anyone out there? Connected devices in food prep? Show hands. I got one. How many of you guys would like to, but find it too daunting or expensive? No one. All right, so what's missing there? Where's the design constraints there? Maybe we should talk about that. You're like, no.
Yeah. Well, that'd be giving away the milk for free. No, just kidding. I think what's interesting is the whole cooking is a choreography, and so it's not going to be the single monolithic smart kitchen that I went to the store, I bought something from one manufacturer, and it solves a problem. It's also about the arrows between each one of those steps, right? So how do we actually smooth the transitions from planning to prep to the process of cooking and to getting it to the table, right? And so those are actually some of the really interesting opportunities to solve. And I think we heard earlier with the drop scale, the scale itself has got buttons on it, so you're able to advance to the next step, so I'm not always going back with a messy hand to the phone. And that's really great to think about that whole ecosystem and how these objects, the phone and device start to work together, and then how from that recipe, which is feeding into the scale and the scale feeding back to the recipe, how do I hit a button and my stove or oven launches up to the right temperature? And again, you're helping those delta transitions between steps, and that's a lot of the missing things. It's okay for us to have these individual elements of solutions, again, based on motivation, but where this all starts coming together as a whole is as we smooth the entire process. And so that requires the hops to become more intelligent and for us to all help out in creating those seamless hops.
Yeah, and I mean, listening to Stacey's podcast, you definitely get the temperature of how tough it is to do that. I mean, she's, the biggest advocate for the smart home. So when she complains about her light switches and that kind of thing, then you realize just like how much is the average person going to tolerate? It's still very much the Wild West. And I mean, I think the way that, the same way to do it is just to have these individual partnerships just slowly, organically grow your, I guess not ecosystem, but the surface over which you can interact with the user. I mean, again, Nest being a good example of how they start with one point, slowly expand, and now you can use the proximity sensors in other devices to complete more of the experience. But you continue to do it in a way in which you do not overpromise, and you just try to add a little bit of utility here and there. I mean, the problem with something that tries to be all-inclusive is it just will inevitably fail to meet the needs of so many people.
So it sounds like we're starting small with single-purpose devices with an eye towards maybe having eventual standards that will get us across these I don't want to call them loops, these links between all of these steps, maybe if we're really lucky, crossing our fingers? No?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to start somewhere where, again, that value proposition gets me more bought in to wanting to then add to the mix, right? And so I know we've talked and we've heard other people raise their hands about the Amazon Echo. It's interesting in that with voice, without having to say anything and without having to say, okay, Alexa, I just say Alexa, set the timer. There's something to that language as well. You can set a timer, and that's helping in the kitchen. And I can set multiple timers. When they go off, I actually have no idea which one went off, why. But it's part of the evolution. Like, we're getting smarter as these things integrate. I don't think Amazon thought this was going to be the killer. They were going to be the Trojan horse into the kitchen, but that's starting to emerge. So much of the smart home today is isolated. I might have smart lights, I have a smart door lock, they don't necessarily interact together, and so we have these platforms starting to emerge where really what I want to just say is, Alexa, good night. The door's locked, the alarm gets turned on, the lights all turn off no matter where they are. Maybe it does a check to make sure all the oven and the stove is off too. I don't burn down the house while I'm sleeping, but we want, again, those things to start working in a singular thought. And so, again, we have to have a single value first that gets driven forward, but then we start to connect the dots. The consumers will start to connect the dots and see that there's more opportunity as they start to bring more of this together.
So you're taking it a little far out of the kitchen there. I mean, Alexa may sit in the kitchen, but she doesn't do all that. And so we'll take it back there again. And we're going to bring up voice, because voice is great for the kitchen because, again, your hands are full. I talk to Alexa, I talk to everything. I would also love to hear your thoughts on other interfaces for the kitchen, because I've tried like drop, and one of the things I loved about the drop scale was it has a thing that can get dirty. There's a button that advances the iPad app on the scale that's covered in plastic, so you hit the scale and like the little step on the iPad app moves, and you're like, I don't have to touch the screen with my dirty fingers, yay. And I would love to talk about kind of other things you can use, like knobs and buttons, and like how do we think about designing for the kitchen in this environment? And please don't take away my buttons. Someone out here, they built something without buttons, and I'm telling you, no, you'll see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally biased in favor of that as well. I mean, I'm an industrial designer, and I really like making things with nice materials. So, I mean, I think a good interface for years to come will still be stainless steel and silicone. And, I think that's why I think it's particularly interesting to take all the existing appliances and tools that are already in kitchens and, add a bit to that existing interface, add a little something behind it. I think voice is a great fit for the kitchen, and I haven't used an Echo yet. And I'm probably one of the people who tried it a little too early and are kind of skeptical about coming back to it. The thing you always worry about is getting misinterpreted. I mean, I talk to my car, and I have to, my voice starts rising because it's just not listening to me, and I don't know the magic words to use. And, one concern about the kitchen in particular, for the average person is it's often just a functional task. You're trying to get dinner done by a certain time. You're talking about the sequencing, and if you get something out of order, it'll add stress. And so, obviously you don't have a lot of room to fail. You don't have a lot of room to add steps.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a magic to voice as an input modality because we can skip a lot of typically manual steps because we kind of put that all into one sentence. But it's one part of that equation. Whether we pair it with buttons and such, those are other inputs, but we also have to have the output. So if I set a timer on Alexa for 5 minutes, in 5 minutes I will get that warning, but it's very hard for me to have a nice glanceable visual sense of how all of these things are doing. I can say, Alexa, how much time is left on those timers, but then I'm waiting for her to go through all of them. If I got 4 timers going, that's not helpful. And so having that display, and we don't have to have a display on everything. I think one of the nice things with a lot of these solutions is that that tablet or that phone in the kitchen is kind of the central command, and in many ways for at least getting that information back to us. So I could glance over at a display somewhere in the kitchen, it could be projected on the counter, and know exactly where all my timers are within 2 seconds, and that helps in that choreography of the kitchen. And so we want to think about the inputs and the outputs together, and we also don't want to divide a user's attention across multiple outputs, or actually, as we heard earlier, like, hey Siri, do this, Alexa, do that, Cortana, whatever, I don't know, go in the corner. Like, we don't want to confuse, we don't want to bifurcate this too much, right?
Well, and this is actually kind of talks to something that if Mark, our missing third panelist, were here, he'd bring up, because he's a big fan of video, and both video projected onto things. So he actually developed something called the Roomy. I think it's Roomy or eRoom. Don't quote me on this, y'all. No tweets. And his idea is you would project things onto your kitchen counters that would help explain. Like if you were filleting a fish, you would be like, "Hey Alexa, how do I fillet this fish?" And it would project like the cutting pattern that you would use. And it sounds really awesome, and I've seen it. And it's pretty sweet, but it relies on a lot of technology that we don't have. But it does bring up the idea, like, where will we use video, and where is a place for cameras? Because like I think every fridge and every oven should have a camera, and we're seeing it like the June oven here, the Decor guys, they have cameras in their oven, and you can both do cool things like, hey, how's my chicken looking, without having to open your oven door, which is a functional loss of heat, and also, I don't know, you can show it on your TV if you're having a party, and you can be like, look, dinner's gonna be done soon, guys. And in your fridge, you can hey, am I running out of this? And you can check your fridge from the grocery store, and that's awesome. So where can we throw cameras in our kitchen? What's the place for that? Did I just answer that question?
Maybe. I mean, I'm kind of.
You're like, I don't even like cameras. Stacey.
Yeah, I'm anti-visual.
Okay, tell me.
I like seeing photos of what it should look like at a point, and I think some of the awesome chef step videos are, it's the show me kind of thing that people really need. But I mean, for the most part, as I'm in the flow of it, like, I want it to feel intuitive. I want to feel like I don't need to be instructed. I want to feel like I'm just naturally doing the right thing. So, I mean, my ideal interface would be, instead of overlaying how I'm supposed to be cutting it, I mean, this sounds kind of dangerous, but the knife would kind of guide itself as I'm cutting it,
That does sound dangerous. All right.
I want to feel like I'm doing the right thing. I don't want to feel like I have to follow instructions. It's more of the muscle memory side of it. I don't know.
No, it's interesting. The camera is only a technology, so it's what is it enabling? And in many ways, I might want it to do, we're going to go crazy, like I want it to do some kind of pattern recognition and actually tell me that it's browned enough, as it's got the thermometer in it and telling me that the internal temperature is just right, and it's kind of the big picture. We shouldn't have to be data scientists taking all of these inputs and trying to make sense of it. That's not smart. That's just a lot of data.
That is smart. That to me is what the smart kitchen could be.
It could, but it depends what we want to do. So it's like, I think it's quite interesting. Again, not to harp on the motivations, the scale, like the smart scales and the micro control of your range or whatever are really great if you want to have be able to deliver great food predictably and repeatedly, right? And so if I've got all these cameras, if I've got all that extra data, that might be me if I'm trying to gamify my cooking experience and I get fun out of that aspect of it. If I don't want to have to think about it, then I want the stove to say, or the oven to say, that turkey is perfect, we're good, just take it out. I don't want to constantly check the picture and while sitting on the couch or talking to friends and family and be monitoring this. We don't want, we have enough trouble with our phones constantly buzzing and beeping and taking us out of the moment. All of that extra data or me checking on that, that's not what I want to happen. If we think about the smart home and home security, if I do put those cameras up, I don't want to be constantly checking my house every hour to be like, well, what happened? Did something happen? I actually would rather just, when something does, or if it's going to, I'm alerted. Or it just does the right thing. Someone approaches, set off the alarm, make it sound like a barking dog, I don't know. But try and avoid that situation. So again, where we can do something intelligent. So let's take it out of cooking, and super brief, to the end side, the cleanup. When you set your dishwasher every night, and Nest succeeded because they're trying to save money with energy, right? But not having to think about what do I have to do to save that money. So if I'm washing the dishes, they all have a delay function. Maybe that delay function is so you can make it wait long enough to where the electricity is cheaper. Look, the smart thing would be every day I open my dishwasher at 7 a.m. When I turn it on at the end of the night, just make sure it's done by 7 a.m. Like repeatedly, pattern of habit, that's it. I don't have to think about it, and I'm saving as much money as I possibly can without ever doing anything different. Like, that's smart.
That is. And that's a function actually of app design though, because not actually the hardware, because the camera needs to be in there for saying the turkey is done to your level. So all you need to do is build an app, and that's a function of, so if the June oven having a camera inside, or the decor oven having the camera inside, you don't actually have to show people that thing. That's with the algorithms in computer vision, all it does is it says, hey, this is done. This bird is toast. It's a bird, it's not toast. This bird is done, take it out. So it doesn't have to actually say, oh, look at your picture of the bird. It can just say, take me out now. But a lot of times, the companies make this decision. They're like, oh, come to our app, we need your eyeballs, you want to love us. Which brings me to another question, which is, right now it feels like there are a lot of competing interests and there's a lot of money, as Mike was saying when he started this, in food, and a lot of competing interests in groceries and companies selling you food, in the appliance manufacturers and the technology companies. How does that play out in the design decisions and how consumers are going to interact with these things? Because sometimes the experiences you get are not maybe the experiences that feel great as a consumer.
I mean, I can only kind of say, yeah, I agree. I mean, I understand, the big Silicon Valley hardware trend is hardware as a gateway to a service. And I mean, I totally understand how that works. But I don't know. That's not personally something I would want to do.
Okay, so you're like, that's hard. I'm not messing with that. Okay.
I mean, in hardware, you have to make tough decisions because things are driven by a BOM cost. The components in, you're trying to hit a certain price point. When we shift that focus over to software, you tend to think, well, once I've got the processor and an OS in there, hey, it's free. I can do whatever I want. If you're powering your product on Android, you're like, well, I get a Twitter client and Gmail for free. Why don't I put it on there? But do we want to tweet from our fridges or send an email from our stoves? And so, there's a saying in design that you're done when there's nothing more you can take away. And so it's not letting that power of, with software you can rewrite the laws of physics if you wanted. But it doesn't mean you should. And so it's knowing what to do and where not to go and when to stop and when to focus on the really beautiful, seamless, easy experiences that feel delightful in what they've empowered you to do without having to do a lot of work to get it. And so we saw the kitchens and that idea of clutter and minimizing clutter. I think we have to minimize clutter in the digital experience. That's where the most elegant solutions come from. I think that's, at the end of the day, Nest was a beautiful object and a beautiful interface in many ways because most of the time that interface is off. Whereas everyone else had a huge 4-inch square display that was glowing in full color, and I don't need another screen on my wall. I don't need 5 more screens in my kitchen.
Their new one's now a clock, but.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of interesting, like how, yeah, I mean, you have these competing interests. You want to get out of the way, you want to fit into the flow of someone's life, and at the same time, you're trying to get their attention and say that you're worth the money that they're going to spend. And yeah, I mean, Nest does a good job of being this jewel-like object on the wall that probably gets a lot of its perceived value for you when you can show it to people, at least early on, and then I guess when you get your energy bill at the end. And I mean, with the kitchen, of course, there's, I mean, we're all fans of food here because we're talking about making it, not just buying it and consuming it. Otherwise, we'd just give up and all drink Soylent. But a lot of people, I mean, the majority of people out there do not think about it nearly this much, and so they have like these more basic value propositions. Can you, just put food on the table? Can you save me time? Can you make my life easier? And now I forgot what the question was.
It's okay, because we're out of time. See, deep breath. All right, everybody, thank you, John and John.